Women have it easy. Just say you're going through menopause, and you can take a break from work and chores.
I couldn't hide my intense anger at my husband Elliot's words right in front of me. The changes that started appearing in my body after I turned 50. It was 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with menopause. For these 2 years, I've been suffering from various symptoms, like dizziness, palpitations, and hot flashes. Even though I'm receiving treatment at the hospital, it's only easing the symptoms, not curing them. Despite living in the same house and seeing my condition, Elliot has never tried to understand my illness.
Dizziness? Easily tired. Back pain? Everyone gets that when they get older. And you, calling it menopause or whatever, taking off work and just sleeping all day at home. Wow, I'm jealous.
Elliot hurled these words at me, unable to even stand up due to my dizziness. He maliciously perceived my decision to take a leave of absence, advised by the doctor, as taking advantage of a trivial illness. Elliot has repeatedly hurled insults and sarcasm at my illness that shows no signs of healing. But this day was different. Elliot looked down at me with a look of utter disgust and laughed nastily.
If you have the time to show off how hard your illness is, why don't you at least do the housework a wife should do?
I am Anita, 52 years old. I live with my husband Elliot, who is 3 years older than me. Elliot and I met through a common acquaintance in our late 20s and immediately hit it off. We continued to date smoothly and got married in our early 30s. We had occasional minor fights, but Elliot was kind, and we managed to live a peaceful life while working hard at our jobs. We don't have children, but I believe we've always been supportive and close as a couple. However, a significant change appeared in our marriage a few years ago. I continued to work as a full-time employee even after marriage, but currently I'm on a leave of absence. The reason is poor health. More specifically, I started experiencing symptoms of menopause in my late 40s, which made me prone to falling ill. Initially, it was mainly irregular menstrual cycles and sudden feelings of heat and fatigue. But as time passed, the symptoms worsened with severe palpitations and sleepless nights. Gradually, I began to feel irritable and depressed for no apparent reason, affecting my mental health. Menopause can bring various symptoms for about 10 years, from before to after menopause. I had heard about it, but experience it myself was more challenging than I had imagined. My symptoms were particularly severe, and despite the advice of my family, the condition didn't improve even after visiting the hospital. The doctor said that there is no specific cure for menopause, and symptomatic treatment is a primary approach. So I've been using prescribed medication and herbal remedies tailored to my severe symptoms. But there's no cure. It became difficult to continue working, so I decided to take a leave of absence when I turned 50, 2 years ago. My company's leave policy is up to 3 years, and soon I will have to decide whether to return to work or retire. I don't want to quit my job, but there's no sign of my symptoms subsiding, and I feel frustrated about possibly having to consider retirement. However, if I end up quitting, I have no idea what Elliot would say. Initially, when I started suffering from menopause, Elliot was concerned and attentive. He wasn't the type to take the lead in household chores, but he used to care when I was unwell. I thought he was a kind person, but as soon as he realized my health issue might drag on, he started looking at me with irritation. When I discussed taking a temporary leave from work with Elliot, he didn't like the idea.
I don't understand much about your health, but is it so bad that you need to take a leave? You're not just slacking off and relaxing at home, right?
I was shocked when he said that. Men also go through menopause, but Elliot, despite having a chronic illness, rarely fell ill. He's always been careful to maintain his health to prevent his condition from worsening, so he probably sees me, who continues to be unwell, as lazy. That's evident from how he responds no matter how much I explain my symptoms.
So what's the plan to improve? If that method doesn't work, Shouldn't you look for another? Why do you keep saying it's not getting better? If it's not healing, find a way to heal.
He seemed far from understanding, but continuing to work in my current condition is tough. When I pleaded for a leave of absence until my health stabilized, Elliot, as expected, got furious. However, after I told him that not only my boss, but also my colleagues and juniors had asked me to take a break, he reluctantly agreed, though still displeased. I had decided to do more housework while not working, but there were times when I suddenly felt ill and couldn't get up. Standing brought on dizziness, and even sitting down didn't stop the sweating, perhaps due to hot flashes. Still, when I tried to vacuum, despite the difficulty, merciless back pain would strike. No matter how much I endured and took medicine, trying to do housework whenever I could move a bit, Elliot still didn't understand.
Aren't you better yet? What's the point of going to the hospital?
It was predictable, but gradually he began to treat me coldly.
Stop being so dependent. If you're at home all day because of your leave, why don't you finish all the housework during the day? It's not like you're unwell from morning till night. Coming home to no greeting, dinner just cut up and heated up. What are you doing at home all day?
And it wasn't just once or twice that I got such complaints from Elliot when he returned from work. I was shocked by his attitude, sighing tiredly. On weekends, when he was at home,
stop lying down all the time. Do the laundry at least.
And I was feeling unwell and lying down. I even got yelled at. The sarcasm and complaints from Elliot increased day by day, and words of care and concern disappeared. While his terrible attitude hurt me, I also increasingly worried whether my symptoms would ever heal, if a time would come when I really got better. However, fortunately, my mother-in-law Cassie and sister-in-law Natalie, who lived in the same town, understood my condition and sometimes gave me advice, which was very helpful. Cassie is over 80, but still robust and lively, speaking clearly and energetically. Her husband has passed away, and she lives with Natalie and her husband. Cassie and Natalie were the ones who advised me to go to the hospital and were the first to suggest taking a leave if it got too bad. I'm truly grateful to them, as both my parents have passed away, and they're the ones who care about my menopausal symptoms. One day,
we're going to have a dinner party at our house next weekend for Mom's birthday,
Elliot said. In Elliot's family, it's tradition once childhood to have a big dinner party for family birthdays. Since marrying Elliot, I've participated every year. Depending on the year, we either went out for dinner or had a party at the in-laws' house. But this year, Cassie's birthday celebration was to be held at our place. Of course, that meant I was in charge of the meal. On the day, Cassie and Natalie were supposed to come in the evening, and Natalie's husband couldn't make it due to work.
Make sure you're in good shape on the day,
Elliot said, glaring at me sharply.
I won't tolerate it if it's like last year.
I understand. I could only nod in front of Elliot's aggressive attitude. Last year, on Cassie's birthday, I felt ill and missed the party at the in-laws' house. Elliot seemed to think he was made a fool of and berated me harshly when he returned home. I remember crying from the pain of that time. So this time, I want to be in good condition on the day of the dinner, as Elliot said. However, if it were a condition that could be controlled just by wanting it, I wouldn't have been suffering for years. Hoping for a day when I felt a little better, I started preparing little by little. Cassie would be turning 85 at her next birthday. Wanting to show my gratitude for all she has done, I vowed to pour my soul into preparing dinner for everyone. With the in-laws coming over, there was a lot to do besides preparing the meal. Elliot has a bit of a show-off side, so he wouldn't be satisfied unless the entire house was cleaned from corner to corner. I cleaned the house meticulously over several days, consulting my physical condition. Elliot didn't help with the housework at all, just relaxing in the living room, but I was used to it. It seems that younger people nowadays do housework, but in Elliot's generation, housework is a wife's job. Especially since Elliot, who thinks I'm just lazing around at home all day, wouldn't help. Then, after finishing the shopping for the dinner party the day before, I went to bed early. I closed my eyes, praying it was just a mild symptom. However, on the day of the dinner party, I had the worst timing as I suffered from a terrible headache and dizziness right from the morning. When I tried to get out of bed, my vision blurred, and I had to close my eyes involuntarily. Then, I heard a violent ringing in my ears and felt as if my head was being beaten with severe pain. It was especially bad, even for my recent condition. Still, I managed to get out of bed clumsily, only to be greeted by Elliot's loud sigh from above. When he realized I couldn't possibly prepare breakfast, he grabbed his wallet and phone and headed for the door. And then,
I'm going to grab some food. And since I feel sick around you, I'll go to Mom's place early. Make sure you have dinner ready when we get back,
he said coldly and left the house. Sure, today was the day Elliot planned to pick up Cassie and Natalie, but dropping by this afternoon must be an inconvenience for them too. His harsh words hurt me, but I couldn't stay down forever. I just drank some jelly drink, took my medicine, and laid down in the living room until my condition settled. But my health hardly improved by the afternoon. The medication eased the headache, but standing up caused dizziness and made me stagger. I needed to start preparing dinner, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I stood in the kitchen for short periods, taking breaks, but time was relentlessly approaching. Feeling at my limit, I tried calling Elliot, but there was no answer. So I sent him a text, but he didn't reply. Eventually, it was 5 p.m., and I was still halfway done when Elliot returned home with Cassie and the others. Elliot, entering the living room, looked at me sitting in the kitchen with a puzzled expression.
No welcome for Mom and the others? Is dinner ready? Nothing is set up,
he said, and I was at a loss for words. The bread was baked, and I had torn some leafy vegetables and added tomatoes, making a salad. But that was about all I had prepared. The thought of being scolded again made my heart race and breathing difficult, but I decided to apologize and tell the truth. Elliot, I'm sorry. This is all I could do. I'm sorry, but could you please order something nice for the main course? I'm really sorry, I said. And Elliot's face turned red as he changed his attitude dramatically.
Are you kidding me with this sickness act now? We were looking forward to this dinner. Mom was so excited. And here you are, making me look bad again, just like last year.
Elliot shouted angrily at me. It's not that. I'm not trying to.
Isn't it obvious? You can't even manage your own health at your age. It's pathetic. You make everyone else suffer because of your own problems.
Elliot continued to berate me without listening. Then why didn't you answer the phone? I sent you a text to eat out. I even sent another text 3 minutes ago for delivery. Why do you insist on eating at home when you don't do anything? My frustration exploded, and I shouted back loudly. Each word I spoke felt like my head was being hit with a metal bat. My vision was so blurred, I could hardly see Elliot's face. I couldn't hear anything over my own voice and heartbeat, and I was sweating profusely from the heat. The symptoms I had been managing with medication all came back stronger, and I regretted not keeping quiet, but I couldn't help but tell Elliot. When my vision finally cleared a bit and I caught Elliot's gaze, he was staring at me in stunned silence with his mouth open. Then, as our eyes met, his face turned bright red, and he pointed at me angrily.
What's with that attitude? Pretending to be sick and not doing housework? And getting angry when pointed out? You're the worst. I'm sick of supporting a wife who's a failure at housekeeping. If you can't handle housework, we're getting a divorce.
He yelled loud enough to be heard outside. All my desperate pleading had no effect on Elliot. After all these years, he brought up divorce without hesitation, and I felt so miserable I was on the verge of tears. Divorce seemed inevitable. I was about to reply in agreement when I heard light footsteps, but Elliot, in his rage, probably didn't notice.
Menopause. What's that about? Getting tired easily? Having shoulder pains? Aren't these things normal for our age? Dizziness and headaches can't be that bad, even with medication. You just want to lie in bed all day, don't you?
Elliot spat these words at me before someone tapped him on the shoulder from behind. It was Natalie, my sister-in-law. With an anger I'd never seen before, Natalie raised her right hand the moment Elliot turned around and struck his cheek with a forceful slap. Elliot, hit by a right straight punch that was hard to believe came from a 60-year-old woman, fell to the floor, looking up at Natalie with a face that couldn't comprehend what had just happened.
Sis, what the heck are you doing?
Elliot, rubbing his cheek in confusion, was met with Natalie's sharp gaze. Then she said,
And what about you? What's with the attitude? Have you been treating Anita like this for years? Deciding the severity of someone's illness without being a doctor? Verbally abusing your wife? You should be ashamed.
Natalie shouted, furious. Elliot, who tries to show a good face in front of the family, doesn't treat me harshly. Even when he was despising me with disdainful eyes as I suffered from dizziness, he became considerate of my health the moment Natalie visited, even making coffee himself. I had consulted Cassie and Natalie about my illness, but never about Elliot's behavior. They are caring people, but if I spoke ill of Elliot, their blood relative, they might harbor ill will towards me. They haven't seen how Elliot treats me harshly, so they might not believe me. Even if they did believe and sympathize, I couldn't speak out thinking of how Elliot might attack me afterwards. But seeing Natalie's actions now, I might have been wrong.
What's going on? Today is Mom's birthday party, and I wanted to make it enjoyable. But it's this guy who ruined the dinner party by not preparing anything.
Elliot, standing up, pointed at me and continued to blame. Then Cassie, who came to the living room with Natalie, glared at Elliot.
Are you saying Anita ruined the dinner party? That's just your opinion, right? From what I heard, Anita was trying her best to prepare despite her pain. She contacted you because it didn't seem like she could make it in time, asking to change the venue or order delivery. I don't appreciate being celebrated by someone who's unwell. I'm not even slightly happy being celebrated by a son who just complains after dumping everything on his sick wife.
Cassie said this to Elliot firmly. Then Natalie.
Did you come to our house leaving Anita alone while she was feeling ill?
Asked.
Well, there's nothing I could do.
There are many things you could do, like helping with chores or being considerate about her health. I remember telling you this when Anita started feeling unwell. You just found it bothersome, didn't you? Stung by Natalie's words, Elliot was at a loss for words. After I started feeling unwell, Natalie had told Elliot to be more considerate of me, but as his usual behavior showed, he didn't heed her words.
Why are Sis and Mom siding with her? Menopause isn't even a real illness. Getting tired easily, palpitations that happens to everyone as they age. Women just want to be lazy, so they can name it a disorder and pretend to be sick.
Elliot continued, trying to justify himself. Natalie sighed and began to explain. Elliot, you might not know, but I too suffered from severe menopause symptoms. It's only recently settled down, but it was so bad I quit my job 10 years ago. Are you really saying a disease that made me quit my job isn't a real illness? Hearing Natalie's words, Elliot stood frozen in shock. When I first started showing symptoms of menopause, I talked to Natalie and learned that she had suffered from menopausal disorders around the same age as me, and eventually had to resign from her job after a temporary leave. She didn't want to quit, but as there was no sign of recovery, She decided to put her health first after consulting with her family. I knew Natalie had quit her job around 50, but I didn't know the reason until she told me herself. Come to think of it, I hadn't met Natalie around that time. We basically communicated via text, as she couldn't meet due to her poor health. It was really tough back then. I thought it would never get better, but Stanley told me to quit my job and take a rest. Stanley is Natalie's husband. He's 5 years younger than Natalie, and his job has irregular hours and night shifts, so he couldn't make it to the dinner. Though we don't meet often, I remember him as a kind man who always cares about my health. Natalie, with such a gentle husband, pleaded desperately with Elliot. Anita is not your servant. Shouldn't you, as a husband, have more compassion?
Sorry, sis. I knew you were unwell before, but I didn't know it was for that reason.
Elliot replied, sounding like an excuse, but Natalie's expression remained stern. Right now, it's not about me. Shouldn't you be apologizing to Anita, not me? Natalie said firmly, and Elliot reluctantly turned to face me. Elliot loves Natalie, so he usually can't go against what she says. Eventually, he gave up and apologized to me.
I'm sorry. Sis scolded me, and it opened my eyes. From now on, I'll help you, Anita, and we'll get along.
He said sincerely, looking into my eyes, and I thought he finally understood. I was about to forgive Elliot when...
Hold on a minute.
A voice interjected. It was Cassie. Looking tired from standing, she came to the sofa supported by Natalie and sat next to me. She looked me in the eye and said,
Anita, you can't believe Elliot's words. You should divorce him quickly.
What? What do you mean? I asked in surprise, and Cassie shared a past experience.
Actually, I suffered from similar symptoms around your age. There wasn't a name like menopausal disorder back then, but from what you've told me, I think I probably had it too. I've told you this before, haven't I?
I nodded slightly to Cassie's words. When Cassie was around my age, the term menopausal disorder was not widely recognized. There were no medications, and it was hard to get understanding from others. Cassie chuckled sadly and pointed at Elliot.
Elliot used to hurl terrible abuses at me when I was suffering. It was around the time before he married you, I think. He was living at his parents' house and would say things like, "Make dinner faster. How long will you lie in bed, mother? Stop pretending to be sick." Such heartless words.
Cassie's face looked pained, as if remembering those times. Elliot, is that true? I asked Elliot, wanting to believe him, but he awkwardly turned away. His silence and lack of denial meant that everything Cassie said was true. Cassie looked down sorrowfully and continued,
My late husband got so angry at Elliot's behavior back then that he hit him. And when Dad scolded him severely, Elliot said the exact same thing he's saying now. He woke up. Indeed, after that, Elliot stopped saying anything to me, because he quickly married you and left home. But Anita, you've been mistreated by him, haven't you? In other words, Elliot hasn't changed at all since then. He still doesn't try to understand others' illnesses, even after decades.
Calmly stating this, Natalie insisted that Elliot's words were just excuses for the moment.
What? Wait a minute. I mean, I won't do it again, believe me.
Elliot tried to interject, but Natalie grabbed his arm to stop him. I saw it all back then. That's why I hit you, just like Dad did. Remember how you cried and apologized to me after Dad scolded you? You said you wouldn't do it again, that you had woken up and realized your mistake. But now you're doing the same thing to Anita that you did to me before. It's too convenient to say believe me after doing the same thing twice. It's unbelievable. With Natalie's admonishment, Elliot bit his lip in frustration. As Elliot fell silent, Cassie grabbed my shoulders and said,
That's why you need to divorce Elliot and escape quickly, otherwise you'll continue to suffer. Now's your chance with me and Natalie here. Alone with you, he'll never admit his faults. You might even get angry for embarrassing him in front of his parents.
Her eyes were filled with determination. It was sad to hear such words from a mother. The thought of divorce at this age was daunting, but after hearing Cassie's story, I felt I couldn't continue with Elliot. Despite the harsh treatment I had endured, believing that once my symptoms subsided, we could live happily as before, but I realized it would probably only get worse. Anger surged within me as I thought about Elliot's past verbal abuse towards Cassie. I stood up, enduring my ongoing dizziness, and looked straight at Elliot to express my intention to divorce. Elliot shaking off Natalie's hand.
"What the hell? Are you all treating me as the bad guy?"
exclaimed. Everyone in the room looked at Elliot with cold eyes. Being scorned even by his relatives, Elliot turned red with rage. Then he said,
"Fine, I get it. If you say so, I'll divorce you."
In his anger, he agreed to the divorce. The dinner party was canceled. Cassie and the others went home, and Elliot stayed at a hotel. Our divorce proceeded without any disputes over property division, and was finalized smoothly. Soon after, I separated from Elliot and focused on recovering my health alone. Half a year later, having had no contact since, I received a call from Elliot. I had moved out, rented an apartment, and lived alone, regularly visiting the hospital. I was feeling less stressed and healthier, but Elliot's call gave me a bad feeling. As expected, Elliot's call was utterly selfish. He had a chronic illness that worsened after our divorce and living alone. However, he had always boasted about perfectly managing his health himself. He had even berated me, claiming I was a lazy person who didn't really want to get better because my symptoms weren't improving. "Why is that happening? You can manage your own health perfectly, right?" I replied, but I knew the reason. Elliot's idea of self-management was shallow, just choosing balanced meals from what I prepared. He never cooked from scratch because I had planned the menus considering his health. Moreover, Elliot, who never did any housework, had a terrible lifestyle in the past 6 months, relying on delivery or ready meals, not vacuuming, leading to a decline in living conditions. Such an unhealthy diet and unsanitary environment would indeed ruin anyone's health.
"I can't live like this anymore, so I want you to take care of me. It's been half a year. Your illness must be cured by now, right?"
Elliot said without any remorse. Apparently, he first turned to Natalie and Cassie, but Natalie was already busy caring for Cassie and couldn't help. Elliot, desperate, contacted me. Though I wanted to refuse, he was my former husband of many years. I wanted to ignore him, knowing everything.
"Then at least look at these albums I found in the storage. If you don't need them, I'll throw them away."
But Elliot said. Believing they were old photos, I hesitated. Though I've had enough of him now, back then, my relationship with Elliot was good, and there were pictures with Cassie's family too. Deciding to go and select my own photos, I visited our former home for the first time in half a year. The house we'd lived in until 6 months ago seemed dirtier than before, perhaps due to lack of cleaning. Leftover takeout containers cluttered the table, making me grimace involuntarily.
"You know, without you here, I don't have time to clean. It's hard to move when I feel bad."
Elliot made excuses without any provocation. While he claimed to feel unwell, he seemed quite energetic at a glance. Moreover, despite wanting care, what Elliot really seemed to need was someone to clean, do laundry, and prepare meals. It just seemed like he wanted a housekeeper. After a moment of thought, "You don't look injured and seem quite healthy. Why don't you stop being lazy and take care of yourself?" I said. Elliot narrowed his eyes sullenly and retorted,
"You know my illness affects my internal organs and nerves, right? Don't judge by appearances. It's outrageous that you call me lazy when I'm suffering so much."
He spat these words out. Seeing my cold gaze, Elliot visibly became unsettled. Then he stopped moving abruptly. With widened eyes, he took a deep breath and apologized to me.
I said those harsh things to you when you were suffering. I'm truly sorry. I deeply regret it and won't do it again. So please.
I anticipated his next words and firmly interrupted. Sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still not over my menopausal disorder, and I can't trust your remorse. A desperate Elliot apologized profusely.
Please, I could end up in the hospital any time because my condition might worsen. I continue with medication, but proper diet management is essential, and I'm in trouble without you. Please, I'm begging you.
His apology seemed heartfelt. However, I knew from Cassie that this could just be a performance. She said that's what he does when he wants to make you seem heartless for not forgiving him after a deep apology. Remembering Cassie's words, I gently declined. I was overwhelmed with my own issues and not in a state to care for someone else. Living with Elliot again and taking care of him would only worsen my menopausal symptoms due to stress. I had just started to stabilize and didn't want to return to square one. I can't. If you really need care, use home care services or a helper. That's beyond me. I explained these options to Elliot, who was still pleading, and made it clear that I couldn't care for him and had no intention of living together again. Then I returned to my own life. Since then, my symptoms have settled, and I've returned to work after a hiatus. Though I considered retiring at one point, I needed to support myself living alone. I always found fulfillment in my job, and despite a 2-year and a few months gap, returning to work felt good. I have no intention of reconciling with Elliot or considering remarriage at this time. However, I still keep in touch with Elliot's family and occasionally meet them for meals. The regular family dinners, a long-standing tradition of Elliot's family, were discontinued after this incident. I also heard that Elliot, for some reason, quit his job. He claimed it was to focus on treatment, but his hospital visits haven't increased, nor has his diet improved. He seemed to be living on his early retirement funds for now. Yet he appears to be living in fear of an uncertain future due to his illness. I'm determined to take care of my health and live a fulfilling life for the remainder of my days.
The rich husband and a mansion are mine. I'll introduce you to my ex-boyfriend as a thank you. Amelia leaned in close to me and whispered in my ear, "Riches and mansions don't suit plain Olivia. Just get out." I had been holding my breath without realizing, causing my chest to feel tight. Breathing heavily through my shoulders. Get out? My breathing was so erratic I couldn't speak properly. Amelia laughed heartily at this. "Oh no, Olivia, don't cry." "Sorry, Olivia." But I decided to live my life with Amelia. Facing the possibility of a hyperventilation attack, Matthew ruthlessly presented me with the divorce papers. I was betrayed by both my husband and my sister. Receiving them made the pain worse, and I crouched down, clutching my stomach. I could acutely feel Amelia and Matthew's stares. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Lifting my face, which had been downcast, I unleashed the laughter I had been suppressing in a huge explosion. There's no way I was going to cry. The ones who'll be crying and screaming from now on are Amelia and Matthew. I am Olivia, a housewife in her 40s. I recently got married for the second time. My husband's name is Matthew. He's a man 2 years my senior. He was a tenant in the apartment I own. While cleaning the apartment, "Thanks for your hard work as always," he would greet me. Gradually, we started exchanging small talk and it developed into a relationship. "I thought you were just a part-time cleaning lady." I'm also in my 40s. It's not surprising he thought that, given my lack of fashion sense and simply tying my black hair back. "I was really surprised when I found out you were the landlord." Matthew, while working, was mostly engaged in his hobby of investing, and before he knew it, he had missed his chance to marry. I also had a bit of a hobby in investing, and we hit it off. Naturally, this led to marriage. Matthew would praise anything related to my investment talks as amazing. Not only that, but when I made simple dishes, he would be delighted and say they were delicious, and when I massaged his shoulders, he seemed to melt with joy. He's older but somewhat childish and pure at heart. Since I'm not at the age to want to wear a wedding dress for the second time, I felt bad for Matthew, who was marrying for the first time, so we didn't have a wedding. Instead, our new home was a high-rise apartment that Matthew wanted. Wow, what a view! Even though this high-rise is actually on the 5th floor. Matthew looked over the city with sparkling eyes. It's luxurious for just the two of us, isn't it? How many times bigger is it than the apartment I was living in? I had never imagined that Matthew's honest character, who was so excited at the time, would change to the exact opposite. The trigger was inviting Matthew's colleague to our home. Wow, amazing. His colleague, Smith, stood frozen in the middle of the room, his mouth agape. This is Matthew's place? It's like a hotel. I've never stayed in such a fancy hotel. Surprised? It's really something, isn't it? Urged by a proud Matthew, Smith hesitantly took a seat on the leather sofa. This was given to me by my wife to bring. Handed cookies by Smith. Matthew showed a troubled smile. Thanks. These are the cookies that sell for about $10 at the supermarket service counter, right? There was no need for him to say it in such a snide manner. Smith shrank back, feeling uncomfortable. Thank you for the cookies. I really love them. I tried to change the atmosphere of the place and offered Smith a cup of coffee with a bright smile. Thank you. Smith took a sip of the coffee, looking relieved. All this time you wouldn't even go out for drinks, and your lunch was either instant ramen or sandwiches with discount stickers. You wouldn't even buy a drink from a vending machine. You really never spent money, did you? So I couldn't believe it when you suddenly got a high-rise apartment right after getting married. You're amazing, man. Well, yeah. Matthew raised his chin and puffed out his chest. Who were those guys calling me a loser who couldn't get married? There's no one at the company making fun of me now, right? My bad. Your wife is lucky. Matthew and Smith were impressed. I was a bit concerned about Matthew's attitude, but maybe this is normal for conversations between men. Smith then lowered his voice. And added, the house is luxurious, but your wife is plain. That's because my wife didn't lose to you. I'm not only interested in cute girls like you. It's normal for a guy in his 40s to marry a woman in her 40s, right? A cute wife in her 20s is something out of a manga. I couldn't believe my ears. Both of them laughed as if they meant no harm. That's right. This high-rise has everything, even a gym and a fancy bar, not like the cheap bars you guys go to. I'll treat you to some drinks. With that, Matthew and Smith headed to the mansion's bar. In front of his colleague, Matthew had become overly confident. Just for today. Only for now. But from that day on, Matthew started to act more arrogantly. You went to that cheap supermarket again, didn't you? We're supposed to be upscale, you know. It's embarrassing, so stop it. Matthew frowned unhappily as he checked my purchases and receipts. What I hated the most was Matthew's evening drinks. He always sat by the window, drinking while looking down. The cars look like toys. And the people are so tiny. They don't realize they're being looked down upon, working down there. Matthew had completely changed. Buying discounted vegetables at the cheap supermarket and making stew together felt like a distant memory. I was beginning to harbor uneasy feelings toward Matthew. Then one day, when I came home, I saw a pair of high heels I didn't recognize in the entrance. I swallowed hard. Could it be that Matthew brought another woman home? Listening closely, I could hear laughter from a man and a woman coming from the living room. My palms were sweaty even though it wasn't hot. I tiptoed down the hallway like a thief. Peeking quietly into the living room, a woman with curly hair noticed me and raised her hand. "Ah, Olivia. Welcome back." "Eh? Sis?" The tension I had been feeling instantly dissolved. The one drinking with Matthew was my sister, Amelia. The relief was short-lived as questions began to arise. I had told Mom about the marriage, but not about our new home. Amelia must have heard about the marriage from Mom, but I never expected her to just show up at our house. "If you're married, you should have told me. I'm your sister, Olivia. Let me at least celebrate your marriage." Amelia, already drunk, leaned on Matthew's shoulder. It seems that Matthew had told Mom about our new home during the marriage introduction. I didn't want to tell. I had already warned Matthew that my family and I weren't on good terms. But when your future mother-in-law asks, "Where will you live?" it's natural to answer honestly. However, "Where will you live?" wasn't just small talk from Mom. She probably just wanted something to look down on me for. They must have laughed behind my back, thinking the high-rise apartment story was a huge lie. No, I was surprised. To think you actually live in a high-rise. It's so grand. It feels spacious and luxurious, completely different from our old family apartment. Well, yeah. This is high-rise quality for you. Wow, I'm jealous. Olivia, you're amazing. Even as she spoke, Amelia kept touching Matthew's arms and thighs. Matthew's smile grew wider with the blatant body contact. Olivia, you've come a long way from being a fast food wife. Matthew, making a face like a monkey, suddenly tilted his head. Eh? Matthew, didn't you know? Olivia's ex-husband worked part-time at a fast food place. Olivia used to go there a lot. Meeting there, it's not like they were high schoolers, right? Working in fast food, it's like a high school job. He was living off you, huh? Really? Mom and I were so worried, we were against the marriage. But I liked him, I wanted to marry him. We registered our marriage without telling anyone and then went no contact. They laughed and chugged their beers. My ex-husband, Stephen, being used as a topic for their amusement, made my head throb. I wanted to stop the conversation right now, but my body wouldn't move. And then, 5 or 6 years into the marriage, that husband died of illness. Poor Olivia. It's because she didn't listen to our advice and married some weird guy that she got her comeuppance. At that moment, I swung my right hand high. I snapped back to reality at Amelia's scream. My palm was trembling above Amelia's head. Scary! Were you about to hit me just now? Amelia, who had been glaring, blinked slowly. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she became weak and leaned limply towards Matthew. Amelia was scared. Amelia's whiny voice sent shivers down my spine. Olivia! What were you about to do to your own family? Matthew yelled at me, and I clenched my trembling palms. I'm sorry, but it's just that my sister... Shut up! Are you trying to make excuses after making your own sister cry? I thought you were a kind woman. I was mistaken. A sob escaped from Amelia, her mouth revealing white teeth. Her overly red, vulgar lips were definitely smiling. Matthew gently stroked her messy curls, oblivious to the fact that the woman in his arms was smiling. But they were speaking ill of Stephen, who's passed away. Eh? Are you still hung up on your ex-husband? Matthew refused to listen to me. It was the moment a complete rift formed between us as a couple. It's always like this. My family looks down on me and makes me the butt of their jokes. That's why I wanted to keep my distance. Amelia, who was always considered more attractive. While I was told, "Don't worry. You can have plastic surgery when you grow up." While Amelia enjoyed a lively student life with fashion and dating, I focused on my studies. I did so because Mom would praise me for getting 100 on a test. But after scoring 103 times in a row, it became expected, and I was scolded for missing even a single point. Olivia is so diligent with her studies. I'm proud to have such a smart sister. I brag to my friends that you're studying hard now to save up for your future plastic surgery. I was often ridiculed by Amelia, who was not good at studies but led a glamorous life. Even now as an adult, do I have to be laughed at by my family? I'm not even allowed to defend Stephen, who has passed away. Worse, Matthew joined in laughing and blaming me, which was unbearably frustrating. A week has passed since then, but our marital relationship has only deteriorated. Matthew, who had been so fond of living in the high-rise, has been coming home late. He probably doesn't want to see me. He avoids our bedroom and languidly secludes himself in another room. In this large house, we barely feel each other's presence. It feels like the emotional distance between us is growing. I can't let this continue. With that resolve, I approached Matthew the next day after he returned from work. Matthew. It's cold today. How about we have some stew together? Matthew, who was about to head straight to his room, glanced at the dining table. Warm steam rose from the pot, spreading a comforting aroma. Ha. His response was cold. I don't want to eat something as common as stew. If you want to please me, serve something like caviar or foie gras. Despite having never eaten them, Matthew shrugged his shoulders in disgust. Then he looked me up and down and let out a heavy sigh. It's not you. My mistake. With those words, Matthew disappeared into his room. My mistake. The meaning of those words would soon become painfully clear. Welcome back. One day, I was greeted by Amelia in the entrance. She was in an unusually good mood, smiling brightly. Behind her was Matthew, scratching his head with a sarcastic smile. Amelia and Matthew looked happy, embarrassed, and seemed hesitant to speak up. What's wrong? Were you drinking and talking bad about me or Stephen again? No, you're being paranoid. As I went to take off my shoes. Ah, wait. Amelia stopped me. I'm sorry, but could you not enter this house anymore? That, you know, right? Matthew. Oh, yeah, Amelia, you say it. Like a bashful new couple, Amelia and Matthew were awkwardly hesitant. You see, we've fallen in love. Huh? I responded flatly to Amelia's embarrassed admission. Amelia is not a high school student. She's a woman in her 40s with laugh lines. Somehow, I felt embarrassed. Olivia, you still like your previous husband, right? I was hurt. So it's only natural for me to change my heart to Amelia, right? Huh? I nodded, but couldn't comprehend. Olivia, I'm really sorry. Her apology lacked any genuine emotion. Amelia clasped her hands in front of her chest, pouted her lips, and tilted her head slightly. She leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "The rich husband and mansion are mine. I'll introduce you to my ex-boyfriend as a thank you." The overpowering scent of a strong toilet air freshener gave me a headache. Her bright red lips barely touched my ear, causing goosebumps to spread uncontrollably. It's okay, relax. That ex-boyfriend is also part-time. You likes those kind of losers, right? Riches and mansions don't suit plain Olivia. Just get out. With her foul breath on me, Amelia finally moved away. I was completely frozen. Amelia crossed her arms with satisfaction, puffing out her chest. Get out? I had unconsciously held my breath, making my chest hurt. Breathing heavily through my shoulders. Get out? My breathing was so erratic I couldn't speak properly. Amelia laughed loudly at this. No, Olivia, don't cry. Poor Olivia. Sorry, Olivia. But I've already decided to live my life with Amelia. As I was on the verge of hyperventilation, Matthew ruthlessly thrust the completed divorce papers at me. Receiving them made me even more distressed, and I crouched down, clutching my stomach. I could acutely feel Amelia and Matthew's stares. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Raising my face, which had been downcast, I let out the laughter I had been suppressing in a huge explosion. What have you been saying this whole time? Why do I have to leave? My sudden burst of laughter must have seemed abnormal. Amelia distorted her face and took a step back. But all the property is in my name? I said while wiping the tears from the corner of my eye. Amelia furrowed her brows in confusion, and Matthew gave a slight smile. Huh? Do you understand what being handed those divorce papers means? Matthew and Olivia are getting a divorce. You're the unwanted one here, so disappear. My rambling must have seemed like the talk of someone gone mad. Amelia's scent already filled the house. Looking down at her feet, I saw stockings discarded on the living room floor. I realized there was no place for me here anymore. Clinging to a house steeped in Amelia's scent seemed foolish. Why don't we just move to another house? No way. I've really taken to this high-rise apartment. Matthew coaxed Amelia with a relaxed smile. Whatever they were plotting, it was no longer my concern. Fine. I'll leave, do as you please. Amelia declared confidently with a smirk. Appreciate your understanding. So, Matthew and I will live in this high-rise apartment. Don't complain later, okay? Yes, be happy. Then I packed my belongings into a single Boston bag and left the room where I was supposed to enjoy a happy married life with Matthew. Days later, returning from the grocery store, I bumped into Amelia and Matthew at the mansion's entrance. You're still lurking around the mansion? Creepy. Just leave already. You don't have anywhere to go, so you're sleeping in the entrance? Wow, how pitiful. Having a homeless person at the entrance of a luxury high-rise is just unacceptable. They pitted me based on their own assumptions. I ignored them and headed for the elevator. What? Want to pick up your stuff? No way. The room will get polluted if drab, poor Olivia enters. We'll send your stuff COD, just don't enter my house. Where should we send it? To some park or a back alley? Amelia and Matthew followed me like fish trailing behind, as I walked briskly. Matthew hastily stopped me just as I was about to press the elevator button. Hey, Olivia, that's the elevator for the upper floors, right? Are you out of your mind? Did Matthew dumping you shock you into senility? So leaving the demented old person was a good decision. I don't want to deal with caregiving. I pressed the elevator button without heeding them. Hey, stop messing around, homeless. It's disrespectful to the upper floor's elite. As I entered the elevator, Amelia and Matthew exchanged shocked looks and squeezed in just before the doors closed. Matthew was excited as if he was on an amusement park ride, experiencing the high-floor elevator for the first time. The elevator stopped at the top floor.
Hey, this is not good. Homeless aren't supposed to be here. Stop it.
We don't want to anger the real elite, right? I don't know you. Despite their attempts to hold me back, Amelia and Matthew curiously looked around. I continued to ignore them and opened the door to the room in front of me.
How dare you enter someone's home?
I glanced at them dismissively before entering the room. Matthew, panicking, grabbed the door just before it closed. He slowly pulled the door open and stepped into the room on the top floor of the high-rise apartment. Hey, Olivia.
What do we do? Shall we go in too?
After hesitating at the entrance for a while, the two of them tiptoed down the hallway.
Wow.
Upon entering the living room, Matthew couldn't help but exclaim. The room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was completely different from the one on the 5th floor.
Why do you?
Sitting comfortably on the sofa, I finally met Amelia and Matthew's gaze. Why? Because this is my house. Amelia and Matthew's mouths hung open in shock, as if their jaws might drop.
I was forced out of the house suddenly, so I had no choice but to move to this room on the top floor.
Oh, right. You were going to send the remaining stuff COD, weren't you? Please send it to this room. The two of them looked like they were about to scream, but couldn't even open their mouths.
Why?
Because it's my house. How many more times do they want me to say this is my house?
I said all the properties were mine, didn't I? The room you're living in and this room, they're all mine. Huh? Why? I didn't know you owned the top floor too. Wasn't the best place you had that room on the 5th floor? Did you trick me?
Matthew, who had lived in my apartment until we got married, had asked if I owned any better properties, wanting to live in the best one. It's not that I tricked you.
The person living on this top floor just moved out recently.
No way.
The top floor? Me on the 5th and Olivia on the top? That's a lie. Don't mess with me. You of all people.
Matthew scratched his head in frustration, his mouth twisting.
Amelia, are we okay with this misunderstanding? Are we okay with being below Olivia? Let's move to a higher-rise apartment.
Yeah, let's move, Matthew.
To a higher-rise apartment?
The two of them held hands, their eyes sparkling with visions of a splendid future.
Yeah. So, Amelia, do you have an apartment higher than this?
Huh? No, of course not.
Too bad. Then we'll just have to buy or rent one. I'll leave it to you, Amelia. Huh? What?
The previous sparkle vanished as the two of them stood frozen, puzzled.
Hey, I've been a bit confused. What do you mean Olivia owns the house? This is really Olivia's place?
Amelia asked with a forced smile. Yeah, sort of.
Olivia of all people, so presumptuous. You studied hard to save money for plastic surgery, but in the end, you didn't spend it on surgery but bought a high-rise apartment instead?
No, that's not it.
I get it. It's a loan, right? With a loan, you can afford anything expensive. Don't scare me like that.
Amelia convinced herself, nodding with her arms crossed.
But you can't compete with Matthew, can you? He owns several rooms on the 2nd and 3rd floors of this high-rise, not to mention other lands and apartments. Olivia, you're in a different league.
Matthew, looking uncomfortable, avoided eye contact and remained silent.
But that's mine too. Because this entire high-rise building is owned by me.
Huh? But Matthew said it was his. Amelia's desperate gaze turned to Matthew, who was visibly pale and distressed.
Matthew, you're lying, right?
Well, it's not exactly mine. It's ours as a couple. I clarified for Matthew, who was fumbling for words.
It seems Matthew boasted to you about properties and lands under my name as if they were his own.
Pathetic man.
Lies, lies.
The one who lied was Matthew. Amelia collapsed on the spot, overwhelmed by shock.
Olivia, of all people, this can't be true.
Matthew, with an awkward smile, sorry, apologized. His straightforward apology hardly registered with the dazed Amelia. Unable to bear the heavy atmosphere any longer, Matthew broke into a forced laugh. Sorry. I own nothing. But my feelings for Amelia are real. I'll always be there to support Amelia. Matthew. Amelia's cheeks flushed slightly. Money or love? Surely that couldn't be what mattered.
So, how much does Amelia own?
Huh? Own what? Like lands or apartments.
What? I don't own anything like that.
Why? Amelia and Matthew furrowed and raised their eyebrows, displaying a pitiful confusion.
Amelia is more loved by the parents than Olivia, so it's natural she'd be favored, right? What about the apartment you inherited from Dad?
Inheritance? What are you talking about?
Did you somehow lose all the apartments you inherited? What are you even talking about?
Amelia yelled, and finally, the two fell silent. They made funny faces at each other, opening their eyes wide, twisting their mouths, and baring their teeth as if in a staring contest.
Ha ha ha.
I lost this staring contest.
Matthew, seems like you misunderstood. The reason I own so many apartments and lands is indeed due to inheritance. You can't buy 1 or 2 high-rise buildings just by studying hard. But it's not from Dad's inheritance.
Amelia and Matthew swallowed hard.
It's inherited from Stephen.
Amelia looked puzzled for a moment, but then burst out laughing. Stephen, the part-time fast food worker?
That's right. But he wasn't a part-timer.
I had explained to my family when I decided to marry Stephen. It's true we met at a fast food restaurant, but Stephen was not a part-timer there. He owned the land on which the fast food restaurant stood. It was a mystery how they ever interpreted it as him being a part-timer. No matter how much I corrected them.
Yeah, part-timer in your prime years.
They laughed.
Stephen was a rich landowner with wealth passed down through generations.
I simplified it for Amelia, whose eyes nearly popped out.
He was rich enough to live off his wealth without ever working at a fast food joint.
The real Stephen worked earnestly, and I didn't quit my job after marrying him either. We didn't live in leisure, but that's why the wealth continued to be preserved.
Furthermore, I learned to invest and nearly doubled the fortune I inherited from Stephen.
Matthew's lips trembled slightly.
I did say it was inherited, but why from an ex-husband? I thought it was from your dad. Inheritance usually comes from parents, right? So, I thought Amelia had a vast fortune. If both were wealthy, choosing the better-looking Amelia over plain Olivia seemed natural. You tricked me, didn't you?
Matthew lamented weakly. Of course, I had mentioned inheriting from my late husband. Why do those who make assumptions jump to conclusions so hastily?
I didn't know that. I wasn't told.
I never bragged about being wealthy, but I insisted Stephen wasn't a part-timer. It was only Amelia's ears and brain that had shut down.
Olivia of all people, wealthy? Olivia of all people, owning a high-rise? Unacceptable.
Some people won't get it unless you spell it out for them.
Sorry for being someone like me who owns real estate worth $190 million. Below Amelia, yet living leisurely above her.
Amelia covered her head with both hands and slumped to the floor, tears streaming down her face without words. I walked to the window and looked outside. Matthew, want to see the view too? A view you won't see for the rest of your life, so take a good look. Matthew came over to me. Then, unbelievably, he put his arm around my shoulder.
Sorry. My bad. I got swayed because Amelia seemed to have a lot of money. Think about it. Do you really think I'd like an old woman like Amelia? Gross.
Matthew shifted his gaze to the vast view outside the big window. People look like toys. No, more like trash. I placed my hand over Matthew's on my shoulder. Then he squeezed my hand and smiled gently. Olivia, I love you. Matthew, I don't love you.
Eh?
I shook off Matthew's hand roughly.
A man who cheats and abandons his newlywed wife, like you, is truly trash. By the way, the divorce papers you unilaterally handed me that day have been submitted. Enjoyed the top floor view? It's time for trash to go back where it belongs.
With that said, Matthew froze, maintaining the most handsome, determined face he'd ever shown. Then, Amelia and Matthew continued to live on the 5th floor of the high-rise apartment for a while. Given how much Matthew ridiculed Amelia, they obviously weren't living together harmoniously. It was simply that neither of them wanted to give up living there. One day, they were clearly lying in wait at the apartment's entrance. As soon as they saw me, they tripped over themselves rushing over.
Olivia! Finally found you!
Hey, what's this about? I didn't need to look at the paper they showed to know what it was. It's the rent bill. You can read, can't you?
So, why? You're trying to take money from me?
Of course. Why would you think you can live here for free? I replied calmly, and Amelia sidled up. You're so cold. We're family, right? You can kick out this trash man, but as family, I have the right to live here for free, right? No. Have you forgotten what you did? Stealing your sister's husband and destroying another family. What family are you talking about? I don't have a family. Amelia weakly muttered. Olivia. I was jealous of Olivia looking so happy. Honestly, I'm in a lot of trouble. Amelia started crying, haltingly explaining her difficult situation. My ex-boyfriend was part-time but spent quite well. When I asked, he said he managed his credit cards well. You know, if you use revolving credit, you only need to pay $100 next month for a $1,000 expenditure the previous month. Sounds great, right? But Amelia sniffled in frustration. Before I knew it, I was buying things for my ex-boyfriend, and by the time the credit limit was maxed out, he had dumped me. I'm so pitiful, right? I have no money, so let me stay in this high-rise apartment. That was the ex-boyfriend she had intended to introduce to me. So, you got dumped. But it's okay. You have Matthew. Maybe your ex and Matthew are similar. Both equally trash. I heard Matthew was into investing, but he never shared details, only asked about mine. No wonder he couldn't. Investing in horse races and spending most of his salary on it. Not all wealthy people flaunt their money. Stephen and I were very modest and didn't waste money needlessly. I thought Matthew was the same before marriage. When our relationship soured, finding a pocket full of betting tickets almost made me faint.
Live happily with Matthew you took from me. Oh, and don't forget to pay the rent by tomorrow. That's impossible. If you can't pay, please leave.
Despite my reasonable response, Amelia cried out loud.
But we're family.
And Matthew clung to my feet,
I love you, Olivia.
proclaiming his love. This high-rise apartment felt more like a childcare center. It wasn't my job to discipline these selfish children. Eventually, Amelia and Matthew couldn't continue to live in the high-rise and had to leave. I moved too, so there's no more worry about being ambushed by them. Though the top floor of the high-rise was nice, it never felt quite like me.
Today's view is great.
I leaned out from my second-floor balcony. In front of me stretched the endless sea. My life in the city felt like being swallowed by a sea of dark buildings. Away from the city, I changed both my residence and job, starting anew. Neighbors share vegetables and seafood. I have congenial colleagues at work. Life doesn't necessarily need parents, siblings, or a spouse. It's enough to spend time with people you like. Even without a family, I'm perfectly happy alone. Come to think of it, Stephen also loved the sea. I'm happily single. Yet, in my heart, Stephen's smiling face is always with me. I'm alone but not lonely.